So greeting, friends. Thank you for joining us today for this very important discussion about hunger. Actually, zero hunger, which is United Nations' second of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The official wording of this UN Sustainable Goal, which is a mouthful, we just call it SDG. The official wording is end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. It is a mouthful, but I like the fact that the two words, zero hunger, it more or less sums up what we are trying to achieve through this initiative. When I say we, it really is United Nations, but then our full support is behind them. You know, it's interesting, current estimates show that nearly 690 million people across the world are hungry. Another term that I heard about hunger is food challenge. That is almost 9% of world population. There are fears that COVID might have been even more disastrous. So we really don't know the real numbers. It may be even significantly higher because of the pandemic that we all just went through. And malnutrition is also having a devastating effect on people around the world. If recent trends continue, the number of people affected by hunger will surpass 840 million people by 2030, or almost 10% of the world population. And I'll be honest with you, friends, this is conservative numbers. These are not real numbers. I mean, because not everywhere, especially in the developing nations, there is no mechanism to truly track what does hunger looks like. We just know and we guess, and then we build on based on that. So hunger is a serious issue around the world. And to address this issue, we have assembled an amazing panel made up of individuals who are experts in their own rights in fighting hunger from various different angles. Greetings, speakers, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this important power panel. We have a fantastic session ahead, and I have some important questions that have already been submitted to me to ask of you. So without significant delay, we're going to jump right in it because we're not going to get into too much of speeches here. Just wanted to give you a few stats, and then the way we will conduct this session, I will kick off with an initial question. Before the question, I will do a quick 1-2 line intro to the speaker. And after that, the speaker will answer the question. Then I'll move on to the next speaker. So with that, let me start with Anna Asava. She is the co-founder of HungerMitao, which is focused on raising awareness about hunger across the United States and encouraging communities to help their local food banks. We look forward to learning more from her experience, the role and the importance of food banking system within the whole zero hunger initiative that we're taking on. So my question to you, Anna, very simply, what does zero hunger mean to you? And tell us specifically how you are addressing it through your initiative, your organization, your movement. HungerMitao.
Great, thank you, Raj. And thank you all for paying attention to this really important topic. I'm here to share. I'm also here to learn from all these panelists. There's so much to be done. Raj, when I think of zero hunger, I also connect it with another of the SDG goals, which is responsible consumption and production. Because I feel like in the world, we are producing enough. It's just not getting to people, right? So that equitable distribution needs to also improve. In my mind, zero hunger means everybody gets a living wage. Everybody has access to nutritious food, because right now we have so many areas that are food deserts. And right now I'm only speaking about the US. The US has these issues. Other countries where things are not as organized have just a multitude of issues. So living wage, access to nutritious food, equitable distribution of food that is already being produced. And then, government needs to kind of figure out, do farmers just produce what gets them profit, right? Which could be soybeans, and maybe the world is just so chock full of soybeans, we don't need it anymore, or corn, and we are fertilizing and genetically modifying everything. So our food, the inputs are all getting messed up. Because I'm saying that because you also brought up malnourishment, right? And in America, you see so much obesity, but I would say a lot of this is because of malnutrition. People are eating the wrong foods, or people's food supply is now so contaminated that that is a source of concern. In the US, we are fortunate to have a very strong food banking system. It's an extremely efficient support net that helps. It's charitable food, but it's a tremendous partnership between government, public, private, communities. And I would say in what we have done as HungerMitao, the food banking system has really made it easy for us to throw our support behind something that is just so efficient and so effective in getting food to where the need is.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Anna. I think if I were to just summarize quickly, I mean, what you are saying, that there is no reason, no excuse there should be hunger, especially when there is so much food that's out there, right? And also the fact that the food banking system that exists very well in the United States is a good mechanism that can be probably leveraged across the world if we want to have a good public-private partnership to feed the hungry.
Absolutely.
Great, great, great. Thank you, Anna. And we will have several more questions, and we look forward to learning more about the food banking system and what exactly is HungerMitao. Next, I'm going to move to my good friends, James Kanoff and Ben Collier of Farmlink, a dynamic duo here. That's all I can say. We had the good fortune to be on a panel with them last year in the middle of the pandemic. And frankly speaking, every time they asked me a question, my jaw was already down there because I was listening to the amazing work these young folks were doing, how they came up with an idea and they moved very quickly, and the momentum has taken them so far. So they have found interesting way of reducing food waste at the initial level by connecting farms to food banks. So what a good connection with the food banks. And they will, of course, reveal the importance of barricading food wastage at various levels. So my question to you is the same, gentlemen, and I would like each of you to kind of maybe split a minute or two each and talk about what does zero hunger, which is again the label of SDG 2. What does it mean to you? And specifically, and more because we heard you last year. We want to understand a little bit more. How are you addressing it, and what have you learned over the year and over the couple of years that you have launched Farmlink? So with that, who is going to take it first? All right.
I'll jump in, Raj. Thank you. And thank you for having us back. I was just messaging James about how cool it is to look and reflect on where we were a year ago talking to you all, and how much we think has changed since then. To address your question up front, I think zero hunger means every single person has access to food, but beyond just having access, they have access to food with consistency, with a reliable amount of choice, and with the dignity to feed themselves in a way that isn't stigmatized or causing them to feel like they're of a different class or a different standard than anybody else. I'll pass it to James in a moment, but in the last year we focused on pretty much primarily how we can do what we're doing sustainably and do what we're doing at scale. And so we've focused on just building our system, building our network, and ultimately working towards a point where we can be rescuing food at any scale without necessarily having to fundraise. James, I'll let you hop in here if you'd like to go.
Yeah, and again, thank you again for having us and bringing us on. And it's also awesome to hear from HungerMitao again. who I know we were with last year as well. First thing I want to say is just something that resonated that Anna brought up was, we do grow enough food to feed every single person on this planet. We're growing enough food to feed an additional 2.2 billion people. And yet every year, 1/3 of that food is going to waste, while hundreds of millions of families are going hungry. And this isn't just a problem abroad, it's a problem here at home too, as Anna points out, in the United States, right? One of the wealthiest countries in the world. This shouldn't be a problem. And it's not a crisis of food insecurity, it's a crisis of indifference about this problem. And I think as long as we continue to do the exact same thing to address this problem and expect a different result, our strategy here has been the same for the last 40 years and it's not working. So we have to be trying new things. I think what they say is the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different result. And so far, our efforts around hunger often have unfortunately ended up that way. And I really hope it seems like the world is zeroing in on this. The government's policy, nonprofits, public sector, private are coming together to say enough is enough. And it's panels like this that hopefully help push that ball just a little bit forward.
Fantastic, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And we again look forward to hearing, in depth from your experience working directly with the farmers, engaging, college students, and connecting with the food bank, the pantries, etc. What efficiencies have you been able to, what inefficiencies you have seen, and how are you bringing it to their attention? So, like that old saying, Rome was not built in a day. So while you're right, I mean, there is no reason why we should have hunger when we have the capacity of feeding 2 billion more people. But again, it's a elephant. You cannot just make it turn around in one sweep. It has to take baby steps. So we look forward to hearing and learning more about that from both of you, gentlemen. So with that, I'm going to now go to Robert Lee. Robert Lee is a good friend of ours who we bumped into while we were launching HungerMitao in New York City. He was there at the launch, and then he said, hey, let's have a cup of coffee. And we met up with him the day after we launched HungerMitao at the New York City Food Bank, and our jaws dropped again. I guess a lot of jaw dropping in my case, because I'm just amazed that, while we have lots of problems in this world, we have wonderful people like Ben and James and Robert, and we haven't even heard with Mohit yet, and Anna. So Robert is the founder, CEO of Rescue Leftover Cuisine. I love it. RLC, a nonprofit organization now working in 16 cities and headquartered in New York City. And RLC volunteers pick up excess food from participating restaurants, caterers, and hotels and deliver it to homeless shelters and soup kitchens, etc. Works with the food bank also. And when we first met up with him, he was also just nominated for the CNN Hero of the Year award. So some wonderful work that Robert has been doing, he and his team, and has been recognized by folks in the media. And I'm glad to see that it is scaling up nicely. So Robert, the same question to you, my friend. What does zero hunger means to you? And tell us specifically how you are addressing that through RLC.
Awesome. Thank you, Raj. And thank you for having me. It's great to be here and really great to share the work that we're doing. Appreciate the kind words. I think, to me, hunger is kind of something that's pretty personal. I think it's one of the reasons why I quit my job at JP Morgan to do this full time. But really, it just comes down to, the fact that I grew up thinking that, skipping meals and watching my parents skip meals so that we could eat, my brother and I could eat, was normal. And to me, ending hunger is a world where children don't live like that or don't have that expectation. And so, to me, it's that simple. I think, as everyone has already mentioned, there's already factually enough food, enough nutrition to feed everyone. And so it's just mind blowing to me that, as James said, the indifference, the kind of, acceptance of these two problems that coexist is just maddening to me. And of course, with our work at Rescuing Electric Cuisine, we're looking to do as much as we can, rescuing as much as possible. But there's obviously a lot of potential and a lot of work that we have to do. So we're really excited to share more about that later on.
Wonderful, Robert. This is great. Thank you so much. And folks, by now you hopefully are seeing this pattern. The panel that we have put together here addresses everything from right where food is being produced, right from the farm side, which James and Ben are addressing to ensure that food is not, our grown food is not being just tilled over or wasted, etc. But how can we ensure that they are accessed in the right time and then get to people who are in need? So right from that to the food banks, which are collecting food items and making sure that those who are food challenged, senior citizens, students, etc., they all get access to the food. And then what Robert and his organization is doing is on the after side, which is we see how much food is being wasted at restaurants and all these retail outlets. And instead of just throwing that food away, how can we actually rescue that and get it to the people who are in need? So I believe in a way, at a high level, we are addressing the entire equation. So I'm very excited about that. But this equation will be incomplete if we didn't talk about, in today's day and age, technology. Clearly, it is technology that's going to make it happen, because we are talking about addressing hunger issue for millions and billions of people. And to do that, it cannot be a manual effort. So we have on our panel, Mohit, Kumar, Tornala. He's a techie, right? Another word for just put your leg, but I'm proud to be a nerd. But Mohit is a techie, and he can suggest ways through how we can use technology to act as a bridge, as an enabler between the hungry people and organizations and movement that have the surplus. So without any delay, I'm going to ask Mohit. Mohit, tell us a little bit about what you believe, what you have seen, how technology plays a role. Again, answering the question first, what does zero hunger means to you? And from a technology point of view, and then how you think technology will play a role here. Mohit, over to you.
Thank you, Raj. And it's a great honor and a privilege to be with you, all of you distinguished guests. And it's a great opportunity for me to share what we have been doing from a Touch a Life Foundation perspective. So for me to come to the question, zero hunger means, I think it's a basic necessity of a human life to survive hunger. We feel that this is a right to access food, and I agree with all of the guests who have shared their views about no hunger is access to food and the consistency and delivering. And one of the biggest issues right now is distribution and delivery. We have so much food available, but we are not able to reach and get it access to the right people or the needy people. That's where we have been working, focusing some time on our organization. And I joined Touch a Life Foundation a few years ago. And when we joined as a volunteer, and now I'm like a Touch a Life Foundation mentor, my focus is that focus on children, young children between 12 and 17-year-olds, to plant that seed of philanthropy, giving back to the society. I mean, it's very, at a young age, to teach those things would be very difficult for them to get. Starting small things with them, I feel that they have tremendous potential when they become adults, and when they become a successful entrepreneurs, they can do a lot more possibilities. So that's where we have been focusing on. And yes, technology is a huge asset for us. We have built a platform where donors and the donee can come together, and we can put in a request where there is a need. It could be corporations, it could be orphanages, it could be individuals in need, or it could be any small organizations where they need some, not only food, but outside of food, it could be clothing, shoes, or basic necessities. So we built a software platform. It's an app where donors and donees can come in together, and then big corporations, when they see there is a need, they will donate it, and it will directly go to the organization which is in need. We've also been done. Yes, one more thing.
Yeah, go right ahead.
We have also been investing a lot of improvements in making sure that it reaches a wider audience across all ages and all corporations. Not only we're not focused on corporations, we are also focused on individuals who wants to donate, who wants to make a change, who wants to make a difference in somebody else's life. They can also come into the platform and then participate and then donate. So that's where we have been focusing on.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited to hear that. And I love the word platform, because by having a platform that actually can connect, all the stakeholders, because I also look at those who need food are also stakeholders, as well as those who are growing it, those who are cooking it, those who are, helping get it from point A to point Z. Everyone is a stakeholder. And unless we have a platform that everybody can all sign up to, and they all learn how to use it, leverage it, we will not gain efficiencies. We will be duplicating our efforts. So I'm looking forward to learning more about this magical platform, Mohit, because clearly you got our hopes up. So because we think that platform will solve the world hunger. So not on your shoulder, my friend. So I think I'm going to move on to the next set of questions. By now, folks, you must have all got a short bio about each of our distinguished panelists. I highly encourage you to go to their websites and ensure that you are able to learn more about their initiative. They would love to have you get engaged. I have visited their website, and it's very easy. You can subscribe to their newsletter, be on their mailing list, etc., etc. And then you may find ways and means through which you can get connected and help. Maybe you want to do a little bit on the food bank side, a little bit on the food rescue side, learn more on the Farmlink side, help develop the platform. You can even move around between these initiatives. So I encourage you all to do so. But folks, as you all know, the pandemic really threw a curveball, right? I know both my wife Anna and I, we've been actively involved with the food bank for quite a few years. And we actually saw the needle moving. We actually saw improvement in the number of people who were hungry beginning to go down, and we are feeling good about it. And then out of nowhere, this pandemic comes along, right? So I have a specific question, and I would like you to be as specific as possible, so that our viewers are not getting purely an academic response, but truly from your own experiences. How did the pandemic impact your initiative, your organization, your processes? Share lessons learned and any unique solutions and approaches that you came up with because of this. There's that old saying, that the symbol of crisis, I believe in the Chinese language, it shows both danger and opportunity, right? So out of this crisis, what opportunities did you see? So I'm going to first ask Robert Lee to answer that question. Robert, no warning, but here you are. I'm going to put you on the spot and tell us about, as you are running around the city and cities now, and rescuing food, I mean, you must have run into a whole lot of problems. And
Oh yeah, it was very fun. I'm sure everyone has had their fair share of challenges throughout the pandemic, but for us, it's, as you can imagine, that the work that we do, we rescue food from restaurants, food businesses, catering companies, etc., events, right? And before the pandemic, we actually had a waiting list of food donor partners where we essentially had 2-3 months of food donor partners lined up to actually start donating with us. And as soon as the pandemic hit and locked down New York City, as well as other cities and other activities, it became very difficult for people to actually donate their food and also obviously just do their normal operations. So weddings that we pick up food from and stuff like that obviously didn't happen, things like that. So the pandemic in general really impacted us as a whole, but it really allowed us to basically kind of think about what the source of food can be, right? So for us, we started to work with many of the food businesses that continued to be open during the pandemic, like bakeries, but also started to donate food from warehouses and from basically up the supply chain. So it allowed us to basically kind of be a little bit more nimble, rescue food from across the supply chain, and rescue food for pretty much all the people that were affected by the pandemic when they lost their jobs and things like that. So it's obviously a very difficult kind of time for folks, but luckily we had a very supportive community, and we were able to continue to grow and continue to rescue food. So it's definitely been a lot of lessons learned, but I think it's a lot of pivoting, a lot of figuring out where we can be helpful and partnering with others such as Grubhub, who've been an amazing partner throughout all this. So yeah, lots of interesting things.
excellent. Because I was actually, Robert, I put you first because I would think that you depend on the volunteer army, right? You depend on the restaurants to be open. So whatever
Definitely do.
food that is there can actually be then shifted to the shelters and other places. But when the restaurants are shut down, when
Yep.
social distancing is happening and everybody's in mode and people are still hungry, right?
Yeah.
Hunger still comes 2 to 3 times a day. So I was just thinking that, wow, what challenges you might have been facing. And I'm sure the story of Farmlink is no different. Interestingly enough, the whole concept of Farmlink birthed during the pandemic. So I would love to hear your perspective, as although you saw an opportunity to engage people and address the issue at the core, but over time, and especially as you're scaling, I mean, that is really, 1 or 2 truckload of, from one farm to a food bank, etc. Hey, that's good, pat on the back. But now scaling it and then running into issues and doing it in multiple times, tell us the challenges you all faced.
Sure. Well, you made a good point, Raj, that we did start after the pandemic. We started last April. And so we've always been a digital organization. And I actually think that made it easier for us to become a national organization because from the start, we had people in multiple different time zones and we had to make it work. I think what's presented itself as a new challenge for us has actually been the return of so many of our volunteers to in-person classes. We used to have such flexibility with timing, whereas now it's much more, how can we make the most, how can we make this work with people's schedules returning to normal? And that transition for us has been a challenge, but proving that we can still succeed and grow while people are living as they used to before COVID, at least within the realm of their university work, has been a good but an important challenge for us to deal with. James, would you have anything to add there on that topic?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on. I think like we started this whole thing because of the pandemic. We didn't exist but before this, and it was really, again, this thing that was happening like long before the pandemic and was happening long after, but was just laid bare, where all of a sudden you have these mile-long lines that are forming, that are backing up freeways, where grocery stores are empty, pantries, the shelves are empty. And you're looking at this while you're watching the same thing of farmers being forced to throw away millions and millions of pounds of food every hour. And just being like, this doesn't make sense. You know, we didn't come to this problem with, you know, some preconceived idea of what a solution was going to be. It was driven by what this was happening amid the pandemic, and let's do something to help, because doing something is better than nothing here.
Very well put. Very well put. No, I appreciate that. And I think also, Ben, I didn't even think about that as the world is moving more towards normalcy, you know, suddenly, you know, people are stop living through Zoom, and now they have their real life back to normal. And yet your initiative is scaling to a level, right, where you probably need more volunteers, more hands on deck. So it must have definitely been a challenge, but frankly, it's good to get back to some level of normalcy. That's for sure. Great. So let me now go to Anna, and I saw Anna smiling a lot when you all were talking about the empty shelves, right?
Yeah.
All the challenges, etc. So Anna, from a food bank point of view, and I'm saying food bank because HungerMitao works closely with the food bank. So you may toggle between both the HungerMitao initiative movement, how it pivoted, as well as from a food bank challenge, what challenges they faced during pandemic. Over to you, Anna.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I was nodding because, I mean, it's like preaching to the choir. Each one of us have lived this experience through our own angle. The memory of the pandemic that I have is talk about a vaccine and hunger, right? Those long lines, I mean, that was the only image that seemed to be invading our family rooms. So from a certain perspective, it really brought hunger to the forefront. People couldn't say that they weren't aware there's hunger around them. Food banks reported that they saw an uptick in demand. I should say need, but in demand, and almost 40% of their clientele were first timers, right? So suddenly we are seeing the need skyrocket, and all the inputs, or most of the inputs that brought food into the food banking system were drying up. The shelves were bare. We were hoarding, right? Every one of us, we were buying up toilet paper like there was no tomorrow. So the food, of course, was being bought. Supply chains were broken. So this was like a perfect storm. Food banks had to go out and buy food, actually from the same sources that stores are buying food. So it created a sort of a shortage. And it was frightening. Food banks depend on volunteers. Most food banks can deliver almost 3 or multiples meals for a single dollar. And they can do that because most of their food is donated, whether it's from the government, from the farms, from people, from companies, and because they have volunteers who they don't have to pay. Now, suddenly the supply side is drying. Volunteers are drying up because food banks had to shut down volunteering. So food banks pivoted, the National Guard was called. And that was a sight to see. I mean, it was actually in some ways inspiring to see how the country came together at this issue, how communities responded. You know, HungerMitao, which works with the food banks, and one of the things that we make the community aware of is hunger in our neighborhoods and how we can help by volunteering at the food banks, by doing food drives for them, by doing fundraising. So the food drives and the volunteering kind of shut down because of all the reasons we all know about. We pivoted at HungerMitao to make fundraising the only game in town. And the community responded. HungerMitao works with the Indian American community to, rise that sleeping giant to come and kind of power the food banks. And the community really stepped up to the challenge. there was not a single day when somebody didn't call us and say, hey, I just saw this image on television. It's not acceptable. What can I do to help? Right. And Feeding America just put out a report that the numbers from last year were not as gut-wrenching as we thought they would have been, because government brought in incentives. The community stepped up. National Guard came together. All of us got to addressing the problem. And that's why I think we survived something that could have been so much worse. So, that's how we pivoted. And I certainly think the efficiency and distribution networks of the food banks were truly tested, and they all rose to the challenge. So there was a lot of pivoting done at every level.
Excellent points, Anna. I appreciate that. And you're right. We, in a bad situation, in the midst of the pandemic, we saw the best of humanity also. As folks like Robert Lee and James and Ben, they just said, hey, this is not acceptable. They could have easily sat home and played video games and just Zoom with their friends. Instead, they said, no, that doesn't make sense. If we are blessed to at least be able to coast through this pandemic, there are several million people out there, many of them children, who are struggling to put food on the table, families who are struggling to put food on the table. So we really did see the best of humanity stepping up during these challenging times. I believe, Mohit, we also saw the best of technology stepping up during this challenging time. So tell us, from a technology perspective, clearly Zoom stock took off like crazy. Many of these companies stock took off like crazy. So from a technology perspective, how did this pandemic impact your initiative? Whether it's the platform or getting the tall scouts together. Tell us your experience.
Sure. This pandemic has changed everybody's life forever. To say the purpose of life and the purpose of giving back to the community has never been so strong in anybody's life. So we, at the peak of the pandemic, all the tall scouts came together, and we have been discussing about ideas, how we can help. In March, April, when it was of the peak time, every kid came up with a different idea, and we prioritized all different needs. There was a shortage of masks, there was a shortage of hygiene kits, and also there was a shortage of food. So we did fundraiser. Obviously, social media is very popular among kids. We utilized social media like Instagram, Facebook, and kids made pamphlets, very creative pamphlets, and they shared it on their Instagram handles everywhere. And guess what? That forced me to join all of their social medias they are in, and becoming a friend of them. And I would post something on, as an example, I would post something on Instagram. I would get like several likes and responses and comments just because I'm a friend of my son. And my son has like 10,000 followers. And I said, like, where are all these followers coming from? Oh yeah, we just follow each other. So that really helped to spread the word. So we were able to do a lot of fundraising, especially from parents, the kids' parents and families and well-wishers. They donated a lot of money for us. And we used the TAL platform to collect money. And using that funds, we prioritized. First thing is, we felt that there was a need for underprivileged, underserved schools in Dallas ISD area. So we first spend some money on purchasing masks and hygiene kits. And the second priority was, yes, we have to do something about hunger. So we did a fundraiser, and luckily we came across HungerMitao. And we have been doing a lot of research. Where is the best place to go and where is the best place to volunteer? Obviously, as Anna mentioned, like, we had all these restrictions and going out, kids can't go out because of the lack of vaccinations. So we use technology to the fullest, especially social media was our backbone. And then we were able to spread the word, and we did a lot of fundraising, and we've been able to do accomplish several projects.
Fantastic, fantastic, Mohit. And I think you're right, the power of social media and how the kids have flipped the switch. Now, we are known through the kids more than the other way around. And one good thing about, you can see in Instagram and other places, kids are actually pure. They are unselfish. They like something, they like it, right?
Yeah.
I noticed that in Facebook, which is really more for the older generation, 2,000-3,000 friends, quote unquote, and your post may struggle to get maybe 20 likes.
Yeah.
And these likes are free, right?
Yeah.
Maybe something that we can learn from our kids. Hey, you like something, don't just sit there and overanalyze it. And by doing so, you are able to push the message forward, etc. So, hey, we will learn from our kids, I think.
I want to add one point.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I definitely learned a lot about from my kid, my own children and his friends, and I've become a popular guy through Instagram with and among the kids. I get more likes from the kids than on my Facebook.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, we will different social medias, etc. But I think you're right. The kids can teach us a lot about how fast things are moving and being generous in these things.
Yeah.
I'm really going to go a little bit out of sequence here based on how this Q&A went. So Ben and James, I'm actually going to ask you the next question specifically to you. I was on your website and I love this quote on your website. It says, in a perfect world, the Farmlink project, which you both founded, wouldn't need to exist. Systems would be in place to streamline the supply chain so that 0% rather than 30 to 40% of food grown in the United States went to waste. Now, that's a great, ambitious, and very transparent vision that you folks have. Very few people will actually put it on that, hey, we wish we are out of business. That's very bold and very pure. But you've been operational now for 2 years, right? So I'll ask you a blunt question. So how have you helped? How has the needle moved so far? What are some important lessons learned? And what does the future look like? You think we'll ever get to that optimum supply chain, distribution channels, zero waste? Maybe if it's not zero waste, as close to zero waste as possible. How do you think we are doing in that regards? James, you want to go first? Sure,
and great question. I would start by saying I think we have a long way to go, and this is not going to be accomplished by one organization, one individual, one nonprofit, one government, one policy. It's going to be hundreds, thousands of small interventions that are really going to move the needle on this, and I hope we can play just a small role in that, and maybe even helping to inspire more people to try to move that needle, like a lot of the panelists who are here today. I think that the truth is there's a lot of like coupling of the food waste and the hunger problem together. We talk about it a lot because it's upsetting that you could be wasting this much food while there's so many people going hungry. But the truth is we don't need to just look at those two problems tied together. And maybe there are better ways to fight food insecurity, and maybe there are better ways to address food waste. And I think maybe that's something that we're thinking about in the long run when we say we want to put ourselves out of business. It's to say that, hey, maybe this isn't the best way to address food insecurity or food waste. Maybe it's the best thing that we can do right now today, but let's make sure we're working for the long run so that we have a much better tomorrow.
If I could add on to that just a little bit, Raj, when we talk about getting to the point where we are reconsidering what that system might even look like, I think the steps that we're taking right now are what we believe are the best steps in order to be in that position. We're moving more food each year. We're developing relationships with recipients and suppliers around the country. And there are billions of pounds of food. And we really do feel like, so we've rescued almost 50 million pounds. I think we'll hit 50 at the end of this month. But that really just feels like the tip of the iceberg of what's available. And if we can create a model that enables us to have access to hundreds of millions or billions of pounds of food a year that we can reliably and sustainably provide to communities in need, well, then we can put the food in the hands of those communities to decide what the best mechanism is for them. Then we can work with them and fundraise and invest, instead of in the solution to rescuing the food, in the infrastructure for how we distribute it and how it's received. And I think that's ultimately what we're working towards. We don't hope to put ourselves out of business because we failed. We hope to put ourselves out of business because we're not needed. So that's our mindset. And James is right. It's a long timeline mindset, but it's one that we definitely have.
You guys are too humble, too modest. Clearly, I see the spirit that quote of yours captures. But knowing you, if in fact, through some intervention, divine intervention, we in fact can get to a streamlined supply system that has minimal waste. Knowing you guys will pivot to address SDG 1, SDG 3, SDG 4. So I definitely don't expect you to go out of business. You will shift where the need is. And right now the need is hunger. So I thank you very much for that. So wonderful and great answers. And I also love that modesty of yours, because you are saying that it'll take all hands on deck, everybody coming together. It's not going to be addressed by one organization, one individual, or one association. A supply chain can only work well when all cogs are moving in the right direction and they are interconnected. So I really appreciate that. Great. So Robert, I have a question for you. Acting as a bridge between the surplus and the needy, it's a good thing, right? But how is that going to resolve the more complex issue of malnutrition? Because you are depending on what excess food that's out there. And that excess food actually may not be healthy, right? But your job is to make sure that, hey, there's excess food and there's hunger. Let's just get them that food out there. So what are the additional precautions to be taken to ensure that we're not creating a problem down the road? Now, I bring it up to you because the food banks used to do that in the beginning, where food bank just made sure that there was food provided to the bellies of the hungry people. But subsequently, they realized that they were creating a problem down the road of hypertension, diabetes, obesity, etc. Right? So I'm just thinking that in your situation, you are at the mercy of what excess food that's out there. So having put that loaded question out to you.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Thank you for asking it. I think in terms of malnutrition, I think it's a multifaceted issue, something that can't be, as James said, really, solved by a silver bullet or one solution. It's something that I think, I tend to think a lot about, mostly because, just for example, my parents would never go to a homeless shelter or soup kitchen to eat. They just had too much pride. And it's just one of those things that you kind of think about in terms of how do you kind of access, or how do you help, people, like that, and thinking about the dignity aspect and thinking about how you deliver, this kind of service. In terms of how we see the additional precautions to be taken in terms of malnutrition and fighting hunger as a whole, I think it really is about long-term solutions. And it's very similar to what James said too. I mean, when you're thinking about solving the issue of hunger, there's just so many different implications that kind of go into it. And we don't see ourselves again as a singular solution to it. But we also don't see ourselves as at the mercy of, what's out there. I think, there's so much food that's being wasted right now. And there's so many statistics, as we all have heard. But really, when you look at the actual numbers in terms of nutrition and how much is being wasted, you just have to rescue 1/3 to eliminate food insecurity in the United States, right? So we kind of get to choose the 1/3 that we can rescue, right? And we have essentially what our outreach people, salespeople on our team who actually reach out to food donors that we want to work with that can supply that healthy food, that can supply what's missing from our partner human services agencies, such as protein, dairy, etc. So fruits and veggies. And so I think in general, it's, very difficult to kind of, solve, hunger as a whole with food, that's rescued. But there are additional kind of precautions that we can take to make sure that we are doing this in as, the best way as possible. So, but great question.
Well, I think, I don't know whether to feel encouraged or not, but to your point, what I'm gleaning out of it is that we are wasting so much food in America that even if we took 1/3 of it, we can bring nutritious food to the needy and at least create a zero hunger in this country. So it's a good news, bad news kind of a situation. But nevertheless, I'm glad that you and your volunteers and your army of volunteers are ensuring that it's not just rescuing food and getting it to the needy, but ensuring that, hey, let us pick and choose where we are rescuing it so we can ensure it is nutritious food that is providing to the needy. So thank you very much, Robert. I appreciate that. And thanks for candidness and taking on this question. I'm going to now move on to Anna. Anna, food banks are a successful phenomenon. I would say successful because they feed, I guess, they address every zip code in the country. So through the network of food banks, hungry people in every zip code in the country actually have access to a pantry or a food bank in their area. But that's only within America, right? And some parts of Canada and some very small part of Africa. But if they are to, how would we extend this over to like Asia, where the majority of the hungry people and malnourished people live? And where are we lacking? What can we do to spread these concepts, right? Like Farmlink concept, the food banking, the food pantries, the public-private partnership, food stamps, etc. How can we kind of package it, take the platform that Mohit is working on and then say, okay, guys, we have something that can be leveraged to other parts of the world where actually need is significantly higher. So another question for you.
No, it's a good question. And it's for all of us to kind of think about, because during COVID, we had conversations with people across the world who kind of lamented the fact that they did not have a food banking system. Right. So, I mean, suddenly it felt like, wow, this is such an advantage to have. In a perfect world, I personally think there will always be a need for charitable food, and there should be for the occasional event that somebody falls on hard times. This should not be accepted as a general way of life, but as a support net for when somebody is in need. Raj, before I move into how do we kind of promote this across other countries, to Robert's model, I think the shelters that receive the rescued food are not just dependent on only that food, right? Most of the times, food banks and food pantries serve shelters. So they receive their other food, but every once in a while they get this, wonderfully cooked cuisine, which would have gone to waste. And now they're able to at least partake in that. And I brought that up because this, out of all the three models that we are talking about today, the rescuing food is a model that we are seeing in several countries now. There are many youngsters who have said, hey, this is not acceptable. In India, for instance, they've created a phone line. You know, if you are having an event, call us if you have leftover food. We'll come and pick it up and deliver it to people who are hungry. So I think individuals in other countries feel like they can do this part, right? Rescuing food, taking it to a shelter. Food banking is a very different scale. That will require a lot of infrastructure, a lot of government, public-private unified working. Right now, I'll take India for an example. Government is trying to do everything, right? There is no public-private relationship. There is corruption at every step. Interestingly, in the Indian culture, there's also a very big focus on feeding the hungry. So we see so many little initiatives where everybody is out feeding the hungry. But because it's not done in a concerted way, there's feast or famine. There's entire populations that are not covered. Also, hunger comes 3 times a day. You know, unless you have a dependable place that people can go to get their food. I mean, they're basically hoping that somebody is distributing food in my neighborhood today so I can go eat. So there's a lot of that has to come together. And, you know, I hope the pandemic also kind of raised, you know, put some lights on this where other governments start to think about it, because this is not something that just one part of the society or public-private can do. Food banks here have been made distributors of government funding for senior food, right? So SNAP benefits, the food banks are helping because the food banks have inroads into where the need is. And they are helping the government distribute food that is donated for seniors, and then also helping people who actually qualify for SNAP or the food stamps program, but who don't know they do. They're helping them fill out those programs. I'm hoping this model expands because there is a lot of value. You know, we appreciate the capitalistic society, but we are in a situation where capitalism has to be tempered with socialism. Otherwise, this chasm is getting so wide so fast. Right. So that's my soapbox.
Good points, Anna. I won't get into the politics side of it, but I think the key point that you just mentioned is that food banks actually provide the food bank model that has now been operational in America for 40-some years. You know, it does provide a sustainable model, right? Where we are actually engaging the public and private sector and individuals to come together and be a force in the fight against hunger. Mm-hmm. All the pieces of that model may not exist in Africa or parts of Asia, but I would say to you, Anna, that it is time that, like, my next question to Mohit will be, you know, as we are looking at a platform, we got to figure out how can this model be replicated, even though some pieces may be missing. But because of that, we shouldn't hold implementing a model like that, so that it can provide sustainable food support to the needy to get them back on their feet. So I hope that some part of your expansion, as you are expanding HungerMitao, the different food banks across the country, and you have also templatized that model where now, I don't know whether everybody else is aware or not, but the Chinese American community has used the HungerMitao model, and they have launched a Chinese version of HungerMitao called Niha. So when other communities here are leveraging this model, maybe it's time that we take that model to the next level and see how other countries can also leverage this model. So you have enough hours in the day to do that too, right, Anna? So
sure, why not?
Why not? Sure. Mohit, I think in order to do that, technology has to play a big role. So as a technologist, how far are we using technology in solving hunger. We are now in the cryptocurrency world, the blockchain world, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning. The whole alphabet soup of technologies are there, right? One good thing that has come out of this pandemic is that, we have tested the bandwidth, the networks, right? And it has helped us pivot to a virtual learning environment. Literally everything that we could do in person, we are able to do in a virtual environment. Yes, as a human being, we do need that human contact and interpersonal thing. But the point here is this, that technology has really stepped up in a big way. But from your point of view, what is the role of these new technologies in transforming? And I want to stay focused on the hunger issue. Not technology solving the world problem, but how do you see these new technologies taking us? Like, give us a crystal ball, 5 years, 10 years down the road. Technology will solve all the problems, or where are we going?
So technology will always be evolving. I mean, look at last 10 years, where we were in terms of technology, and now where we are in the next 10 years, 20 years. It's continuously going to be expanding and reaching out, making lives easier for everyone, and accessibility. One example you mentioned is during pandemic, it really tested our bandwidth, the network bandwidth, and it made everybody to focus on work, whether it's work from home or learn from home, schools. So technology will always be evolving, and with the cloud computing, which will make one big world into one. We all get together, it'll be connected. And the other thing is access to the internet. You will see that internet will be available everywhere, every corner, even in the deep forest, you'll have access to internet in the next few years. With all the SpaceX technology, trying to reach out to as many locations as possible. So connectivity will make a difference. It will connect people. Obviously, as you said, we still need people-to-people contact, but at the same time, access to the internet will make a big difference in the lives and making life much better. So coming to HungerMitao and our foundation and our Touch a Life Foundation platform, our platform is free globally. Every country can use it. We have been seeing a lot of activity in the last 1.5 years. Many donors are coming in, wanting to help, registering. At the same time, there have been several organizations, schools, and orphanages coming that they have a need. And they used our platform, especially in South Asia. We see a lot of activity happening in India as well. We're getting a lot of data. We are analyzing the data. We created a global youth challenge for kids under 22 years, where they come up, they can submit their creative ideas or any idea they have within that sustainable development goals, 17 goals they have, they can submit. And we are connecting them to the corporate world to sponsor their projects. And we have got a huge response. We got responses from 650 institutions across the world wanting to participate in the challenge and make a difference in humanity, and make a difference in how they can solve the problems. So technology will always be evolving. It will continue to make lives better in all different walks of life.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Raj.
And we actually, I believe I will take the liberty on thanking on behalf of all the panelists to Touch a Life Foundation, the TAL organization, for, first of all, providing this platform to get the word out, in this case about SDG 2, which is zero hunger, But clearly, Touch a Life is looking at much more than hunger, which is important. UN has identified 17 sustainable initiatives. So Touch a Life Foundation is trying to address every one of them and using technology as a way to connect the world and enable better, cheaper, faster solutions to make this world a better place. So our hats off to the TAL team. Thank you very much. Folks, we are running a little bit out of time here, but I would like you to, without feeling rushed, do give your closing remarks. And James and Ben, I would also like you to, in your closing remarks, talk a little bit about the congressional medal that your initiative has received. So if I may, next take 2 to 3 minutes and talk about that and anything that's on your mind, anything that I may have missed asking you. This is your chance to share with our listeners about Farmlink, about yourself, about the hunger issue.
Thank you, Raj. And thank you once again for having us back. It is, it's awesome. And we hope that we can look back in another year and see how far we've all grown. But I think our biggest focus right now is acknowledging that we are not a disaster relief organization. We are not a COVID response organization. We're reacting to the global epidemic that is food insecurity and at the same time food waste. And while those two, as James acknowledged earlier, are not necessarily one-to-one matches, they are very much in our focus. I think for the next year, our biggest goals are to scale, to grow, to understand how we can provide the services that we've provided at the scale we have to so many more people and with more consistency and more access. I'll pass it to James to talk a little bit more about the Medal of Honor and just share your closing remarks too. Thank you.
Yeah, what I was actually gonna bring up, just like given the timeliness of this, with like the UN climate change conference going on, I think it's hard to like decouple these things of both wanting to have a sustainable food system that can provide for a growing population, that one day may reach 10 billion people, and at the same time be able to support that population without destroying our planet. And I think maybe sometimes it's oversimplified that we actually have all the technologies that we need in order to do that. And I was just thinking that like in the same way that you kind of see this conference where people are coming together and they're pledging, we're going to cut these, we're going to reduce methane emissions, we're going to cut this by 2050. I hope that hunger isn't forgotten in that, and that's a role, and part of creating a sustainable planet is also one that can provide for everyone. We can't get to net zero emissions with leaving a whole generation, a whole population behind. That's not good enough. And we also can't pretend that we have all the solutions. We need investments in order to develop those solutions. And so we were fortunate enough to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor for our work, but we have a long way to go. And I'm just honestly really grateful to get to be a part of a group like this with people who are working really, really hard every day in order to do that. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And congratulations for that recognition, well deserved. And, and I'll be honest with you, yes, we have spent a productive hour together, but every time I open up the news app and I hear about what's happening in Afghanistan, what decisions some government is making, it just kind of, frankly speaking, tears you apart, because we are coming up with innovative solution for a civilized world. And yet when we see uncivilized action being taken in other parts of the world, it just kind of rips you up, so, but please don't give up. Please continue to move forward, because I have a simple mantra that I believe in, which is, try and fail and still feed a few, then not try at all. That's just my simple mantra. So thank you again, guys. Really appreciate that. Anna, I'm going to ask you for any closing remarks that you have before we sign off today.
This has been such an encouraging and inspiring 1 hour actually. It's great to see youngsters who are engaged in this issue. I have to say that the last 2 years have been the busiest for Raj and I, because the need was so high, right? We are seeing extreme success in what we are trying to do. We took one community, the Indian American community, and decided we'll make them become more aware of the hunger that's around us and what they can do about it. And to keep it really simple, we said the food banks are doing such a great job, let's just put all of our resources behind the food banks. So that is the model we are working with. And it gives me a lot of excitement to share with you all that in 4 years since HungerMitao's launch, HungerMitao as a program is in 7 food banks across the country. It's at Feeding America and has enabled 40 million meals. So it's inspiring to see, okay, yes, we put in some work, the community stepped up, and we've moved the needle. And what is extremely encouraging for me is that this model is being replicated across other communities. And hopefully, this just has a life of its own, and it involves everybody to become a little more invested in the communities that we live in. With that, thank you, Raj, and thank you to Tal. And I really thank all of my co-panelists here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Really appreciate that. We'll move on to Mohit. And then Robert, be ready. You're at the queue next.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, all of you. I personally learned so much of great work. You all wanting to do more things, wanting to do more contributions in new ideas and new avenues. This is such a great session. I personally got more inspired to do more different things and learn different things as well. So from a Tal perspective, we are continuously evolving, developing our technology based on the feedback we have been getting. And I see that within the last 2 years itself, we reached out to a greater audience, connecting more donors coming on the platform, more need donees has been getting into. And at the same time, we have been working together, not only just the software area, but also actually physically becoming a volunteer and doing the service to the community, local communities. So all the kids have been the last 1.5 years, not just using the platform, but also actually doing the work, getting the food to the communities. So we'll continue to do that. It's great inspiration stories from all of you. And I'm confident that we'll be even moving the needle higher. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mohit. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And Robert, we will use you for the closing here. So your closing
Sounds
remarks.
good. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll echo everyone's, sentiments here. And, for me, it's really inspiring to see so many people, tackling the same issues. I always like to say that, we started because we wanted to kind of target smaller amounts of excess food and make sure that, these smaller amounts of food are also not wasted. And, I hope that, those listening who can, do even a little bit to fight these crazy problems really go a long way. So I hope, people feel encouraged and, feel like they can help and do something to fight their issues. And yeah, it's been an honor to attend today, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so very much. Really appreciate that. Hang on 1 second, my friends. I will just, let me see, how do we do? Okay, great. So folks, first of all, my huge thanks to the distinguished panelists. I think it was Where did the hour go? I don't even know. It was so mesmerizing and so many different perspectives towards the SDG 2, which is the UN's Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which is zero hunger. So folks, hopefully you found a lot of value in our discussion today. I would like you to make sure that you go ahead and visit the website of all of these folks. For example, HungerMitao, their website is hungermitao.org. Farmlink, Ben and James, their website is farmlinkproject.org. I went to farmlink.org and they tried to sell me the domain, so don't go there. And then Rescue Leftover, I don't necessarily have their website, but if you do a search on Rescue Leftover Cuisine, Robert, you want to chime in? What is your website?
Yeah, it's just the name of the organization, rescuingleftovercuisine.org.
Rescuingleftovercuisine.org. So please make a point of visiting that. And Tal Scouts, who are our sponsor today on World Kindness Day, I believe. So that's pretty straightforward. talscouts.org. Am I right, Mohit?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay, so yeah, please go visit them. And finally, my request to all of you, if you have been inspired by any one of them or all of them, and would like to start something new, reach out to them. They will share with you stories of how they got inspired and how they started something. Because social entrepreneurship will not happen just by you thinking in your own mind. You have access to all these social entrepreneurs who will be happy to share their journey, what inspired them, what were the first steps they took, etc. Secondly, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If something that they are doing that you like, throw your support behind it. And that's exactly what we did with HungerMitao. We didn't go around setting up another sandwich making operation because we know, as Anna mentioned, hunger comes 3 times a day. So there needs to be a sustainable solution. And when we found out that the food banks are doing such a good job, we threw our support behind that. So I urge you, listeners, that please visit their website, learn about what they are doing. No, if you have entrepreneur ideas and you want to pick their brains, reach out to them. I'm sure that they will give some time to you and talk to you about their journey. If you can throw support to what they are doing, if you have ideas to help improve their operations, they are open to that as well. So with that, I'm going to sign off for today's session and hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed moderating this distinguished panel. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining this panel and make this success. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys.